No, no, just a community. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just got into this building. Well, gotcha, appreciate it. We bought it in 2020, but then and we were gonna renovate it, but then COVID shut that down for a while. So we only just finished it like and opened it like at the end of last year. So it's pretty new. It's pretty new. We just got into this. But alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I will be one of our conversation facilitators today. I'm actually joined. It's actually today's a little bit special. Welcome to one second. We're having some audio issues. Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. Where's that coming from? I think you got Google Chrome open up there. Are we good? Okay. So, yeah, as I was saying, we're doing things a little bit differently today. Not only am I not the only facilitator, this also isn't our regular book study session. That's because for those of you that have been tuned in, y'all know that this month and for the next few months, we're going to be pairing our regular bi-weekly book study with a series of workshops on what it takes to build and maintain healthy relationships. As y'all may also know, I'm a part of Scarabus Consulting, which is a consulting firm started by the team members and leaders of the Kepper Institute to help folks learn the tools of relationship focused, intergenerational community wealth building. And so I'm joined today by Khalil in my Africa, my dad, as well as our friend Mimi Zakum, who should be joining us shortly, two other members of Scarabus who will be helping me lead the conversation today. And we'll, oh, I think there she is. I think she's Kepler Institute. What, is that Mimi?
Hey, hey.
Yo, what's up, Mimi? Good to see you. I would just mentioned your name. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about Scarabus here shortly, before we really get into it. But for now, as always, we got to get started with our check-in. For those of you who are new to the space, whether you're here in person or watching us via the live stream, or even just looking at the recording in the future, the check-in is something that we do at the beginning of all of our meetings here in this community, just to make sure that we're maintaining an awareness of each other. We're prioritizing the people around us. We know where everybody's at, what everybody needs. What we need to do to take care of each other. So typically, what that looks like. And actually, Nas, I'll have you go and pull up the presentation now, because I think we got our check-in question for today on there. So while Nas gets that up, I'll explain just that typically what the presentation looks like is a yes, that's the one. Oh, it's not a, is it? Can y'all see the presentation on the screen?
No,
I can.
You
you can't. I
can.
see. I see. I mean, am I supposed to just see in the opening screen of the PowerPoint? That's
Yeah.
it. Okay. Yeah, I see that. I thought it was
Okay, well,
just
great. Nas, can I see the presentation?
There we go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, get that slideshow. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. Oh, go back one. Okay, great. So we'll get started with our check-in. During that time, we'll also give a little bit of definition on what Scarabus Consulting is, what we do, why we do it. After that, we'll go into definitions. The conflict of our conversation today is conflict transformation. So we'll talk a little bit about what conflict transformation is, how it works, and why it's important. We'll talk about some tools, things that you can use to practice conflict transformation within yourself and your community. And that's also where we'll talk about our tie in with the four agreements. For those of you that are maybe just joining us for this session, or who were not able to join us for last session, this conversation is a companion to another conversation that we had about the four agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So specifically today, we're going to be talking about the first two agreements, which are be impeccable with your word and don't take anything personally. We'll get into those in the tools section. And then we'll have some time to go into breakout groups, talk a little bit about some of our personal experiences with conflict, and the ways that some of these tools can maybe apply to some of those situations. And then we'll come back and talk about those conversations and close out of here for the night. So, without further ado, let's get started with the check in. Next slide, please, Nas. Awesome. So, check in today. It's going to be share a color and a number that are both supposed to kind of represent, how you're feeling at the moment, just where you're at. That can be on whatever scale you want. Number can mean whatever you want. Color can mean whatever you want. Just kind of let us know how you feel. And then the check in question for the day is, what's your most recent conflict experience? This can be something that's resolved, something that's unresolved, something big, something small. Just think about it and let us know, and we'll come back and have a little bit more discussion on it at the end of the conversation. But I'll go ahead and start it off, demonstrate, show y'all how it's done. I'm feeling like a slate, green like a chalkboard. Feeling like a 7 today. And let me see. I would say the most recent conflict experience that I'll talk about today. Um, one of the key members of our team and community is in the hospital right now for some serious for some pretty serious medical conditions that she's going through. And she's been there for about a week, and more than a week, almost two now, actually. And at the start of that, there was a lot of conversation on our team about just like the best way to show up for her, to give her what she needs and to help her recover, and also just like balancing that with, you know, how to, hold some of the other responsibilities that we got to hold even amongst this challenge. So that was my most recent conflict experience that I feel like sharing right now. And I'll pass it to you, Rusty.
My name is Rusty. This is my first time here, and today I'm feeling um, maybe a little uh, yellow, maybe number 6 today, um, maybe a 5. Uh, I'm just concerned. I had a friend of mine, her daughter. She's like just right at 9 months pregnant and was in a car accident. She went to the hospital, but the good thing is that the baby is fine and she's doing well. But it did told her vehicle. Uh, thank God she had insurance. Um, I'm a certified recovery specialist. Did some work in outreach, harm reduction, street outreach work, and just like to see people get better. Thank you.
You mind,
How'd you end up at Kepper, Rusty? If I don't mind me
Well,
asking.
I was online and I was looking at events, the event page.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I have some CEUs that I need to get in, and then also
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to start just getting out more, interacting with the community. I've been isolating um, during the winter time, the winter months, and I think I need to get out more, do some more walking, get some exercise in. And
Hmm.
so when I seen the event and this said diamond, I know diamond takes the pressure to make a diamond. So I'm thinking, well, this sounds real positive. I think I might want to just look into that a little more, maybe to boost my morale a little bit today.
Can you tell us a little bit about how
Hmm.
you got the work that you do? Tell us your experience.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've been homeless for uh, off and on periodically for more than 20 years. Today, I'm proud to state that I do have 6 years sobriety. Uh,
Congratulations.
thank you, and by the grace of God. Um, so, permanent supportive housing. I'm a senior citizen living at permanent support in supportive housing. I also do a lot of speeches for them in regards to how it brought me off the street.
Hmm.
Uh, it's called Housing First, and I share my story on that. And what I like about Housing First is that there's no preconditions upon a person being housed. If you got bad credit, you can still be housed. If you have bad rental history, you can still be housed. Criminal record, you can still be housed. Money, you can still be housed. You don't have to have money to be housed. If you have mental issues, all of that stuff make you vulnerable and work in your favor. And I just think that is so good. So I share my story to let people know because I know how I was when I was out there. And homelessness is not homelessness. It's a dark and lonely place. It can be really lonely. Yeah, it's no dignity in being homeless. You know, most people feel beat down, unappreciated, alienated from society, and I see that, and there's a big marginalized force, the Black community, when it comes to homelessness here in Indianapolis, and so I'd like to see that change. One of my biggest pet peeves is the mental health people that are on the street that really doesn't have the capability of making the decision to even get off the street. Their disease tell them that I don't have a disease. Then that's kind of bad. But I'm here today just to let people know that, I believe that a person can change the trajectory of their life, embark on a brand new path, and do things different. And recovery coach, I know I needed to be totally engaged in my recovery after 30 years of addiction, drugs, alcohol, crack cocaine, intravenous drug user, 12 years prison time, first degree arson, homicide. Uh, it's just, if I could do it by the grace of God, maybe my story may be a little different, but hopefully that someone can resonate with where I'm
Hmm.
coming from. And if I can do it, I believe that someone else can.
Hmm.
Now I've been permanently housed for over 6 years, no late payment, and never missing a rent payment. But it took some people to come alongside me
Hmm.
and to, help me love myself until I can learn to love myself.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was a lot that I went through, but I had to get to that point to where nothing else mattered. You know, it's my life. It was a life and death situation. I was drinking myself into oblivion. I had two brothers die of cirrhosis of the liver. Uh, it's been I had to get to that point where I really said I've had enough of that lifestyle. And what had to change? Everything had to change. What worked before yesterday may not work today. I had to change my way of doing things, people, places, and things, plate, toys, and everything else had to change my way of thinking. Uh, I just thank God that my dreams are alive again today. And I have more hope that things will continue to get better. Thanks.
That was excellent. And Rusty, just a couple things I want to just first of all, I appreciate you sharing candidly, openly, honestly, about your story. And I always just think about you just never know who's watching or who you're influencing, in your space. And from this story and just in your journey, I can tell you kind of person that exudes a lot of energy. I heard you mention CEUs. Are you in what school program or have you been in that requires CEUs? Just out of curiosity.
Certified addiction pre recovery coach,
Yes, sir.
Capric
Okay.
One,
So yeah, okay, you
uh,
make sense. Yes, sir. Okay.
community health worker, certified recovery specialist. And yeah, I have to have CEUs, continuing educational units for that. So,
Pleasure to meet you.
my pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Next person. Or just pick somebody to go.
Okay. I can't see that for.
Let's have Dad, let's have you go next.
All right. I'm a green eight. The one conflict I shared is in community with some of our members of community and some other members of all members of this community. And what I'll share is that within community, there has to be space for everybody and all kinds of people. You have to provide space, but you cannot do that without framework, structure, some kind of order, and some kind of system of accountability. Because unfortunately, humans, I believe the humans just at our most you know, carnal existence have difficulty in relationships and treating how we treat others and can become very egotistical and so forth. So there have to be some kind of framework and space, and then people have to adhere to those. And when people don't, somebody has to hold people accountable. And so um yeah, I think the conflict I'm involved in is tied to the lack of accountability for the perpetrator, for the people that are involved, and then also not enough collective courage in the space to have difficult conversations. So that's what I share, and I'll pass it to my brother Alvin.
Thanks, Khalil. Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Feeling
bro.
like, let's say an 8 sand color. And recent conflict I have every day, all day, every day. I mean, I would say like probably uh, um, one that I'll note is just in supporting. I'm trying to think of the best one. I'll just give an example from even a meeting I had today with some other folks on our team, just thinking about the best way for us to run it and communicate with each other. So I think as part of that, communicating like very directly to the group, like, hey, here's why I'm thinking this and why it's important to me. And then calling for a session for us to talk through it, even 30 minutes. And then even like partner on the meeting called me right afterwards to discuss it. So one, just getting right at it when there's like differences of opinions on how stuff should go, and just call a session. And I'll pass it to whoever hasn't gone yet.
That was me. Hey, y'all. I like that sandy color. I'm feeling that. I was playing in the sand with the kids over at the daycare earlier. So, sand. Probably about a 7 right now. And conflict I've been experiencing lately. Um, So probably mostly an inner conflict. As Chin mentioned, like there's a beloved member of our community who is in the hospital with some pretty serious health challenges, and um, I really want to be here and am very engaged in supporting throughout that. But I also have some family stuff going on. Um, in Cincinnati. And I like also want to be there and feel some pressure from my family to go there. And then the universe has also been speaking to me in interesting ways, um, by things like my car suddenly not working, so I couldn't go out of town, and my phone dying and being lost, so I couldn't communicate, and me just trying to sort through what feels right to do in the moment. And I guess for me, making sure that if I am going to be present and support my family, that I have to be in a good place to do it. Otherwise, it doesn't help anybody. So giving myself the space to get there, but also making sure that I'm not just avoiding any of the difficulties of that situation. So really having to be very in touch with myself of where I'm at and what I feel I'm able to do in that moment. And I'll pass it back to Chen.
Sweet. Nas, get over here and close us out.
Ooh, I don't think you can see me. I'm gonna sit down. Let's see what happens. Feeling like 9.5 purple, my usual, and my recent conflict experience. I say some type of self-conflict. I'm real. Sometimes I self-sabotage a little bit. I'll trick myself in my spot. So I'm learning how to unlearn that. And that's been a little bit of a process, just accepting what's coming to me. And yeah, that's me. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Nas. Alrighty. So yeah, thank you everybody for checking in. Thanks especially to you as well, Resty, for sharing a little bit about your story. Uh, we got a little bit of a smaller group today, but our conversation is about, you talked a lot about like transformation, and the idea that you reached a point where your internal conflict with yourself pushed you to make a change in your life, so and this idea of like conflict transformation, that's what our conversation's all about. So maybe I know you came here to listen, but I do hope that you feel inclined to share some of your experiences. Hopefully, hopefully you can, um, you know, find something that is that's relevant, as we're talking. But we may have some more folks join us here in the conversation as we get a little deeper into it. We may not, but if we do, we'll just wait for the natural pauses in the conversation to let them do their check-ins as well. But for now, we'll go ahead and get into the main part of our presentation today. So let's hop on over to the next slide, and we'll talk about defining conflict transformation. So, um, man, I hate to pick on you so early, man, but I'm gonna ask you, based on, I guess like what we've already kind of hinted at, what we've already talked about a little bit. When you hear that term conflict transformation, what does that make you think of?
Make me think of how a better way maybe of handling dealing with conflict. My way of thinking about it and my way of approaching it and how I approach conflict, coming up with a resolution for a better way of approaching conflict. Uh, that's what it means to me.
You say like a better way, better than what, and what makes it better?
Okay, like I shared, alcoholism and drug addiction, and I think those things stem from me trying to deal with some issues of my own that I would numb my feelings instead of, you know, approaching that in a negative way with numbing my feelings with drugs and alcohol. are situations where in relationships, when relating, I have this person that I'm trying to help, and it's a female, and she has a mental illness, and it's very, very difficult. She's been traumatized. She's been through quite a bit, and she's schizophrenic, paranoia, with some psychosis. And I remember when I didn't know much about that and how tried to help her in her conflict because we did used to be in a relationship, but I moved on. But it's kind of hard to see a person, with a mental illness in the street, especially someone that you know. Um, I used to kind of spout out and didn't know how to separate the person from the illness. And so I think that's part of the conflict resolution is I had to learn how to deal with people that have been traumatized. And, and then it's changed my whole perspective on when I see a person like walking down the street and they're talking to themselves or they're spouting off that they're going through something. I asked today, I don't say what's wrong with them. I said, what happened to them? And and so I found better ways of trying to interact with that person. Definitely not giving that person any idea that we're going to be in a relationship, and that's kind of difficult to do, especially with someone that's dealing with a mental problem. It used to just hurt me to my heart, and it still does today to see that person leaving with a whole bag. With when you're on the street and you're homeless, you got a bag of stuff. Your life possessions is in this bag, or you may have, and for her in her case, she have a storage, but the paranoia make her almost carry everything with her where she go. Well, I've come to the conclusion that I can't really help her. I can help her in a certain way, but I can't help her by bringing her into my home. Can help her from a distance because I see the conflict with me is how is this affecting me and my peace that I cherish, and I embrace my peace greatly, and I'd like to keep it that way. And I know according to my training, we don't do that, but sometimes, well, for me at this point in time, I just seen it was detrimental to that person, a life situation at that time. So my conflict now is how to, and I speak about this a lot in Corporation for Supportive Housing because we help people uh, get housed, uh, housing first model, which I like to bring up a lot of times, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, all of these programs, wraparound services that help with people that are dealing with issues like that. I know that there are some help, and I've helped this person get housed, but then because the person mental problem, they get unhoused. The thing that got them in is the same thing that get them kicked back out. So I'm really speaking on that because I just think that there should be a different resolution to that. And maybe they need to be tagged a different way, or maybe some inside help ahead of time. Uh, it's still something that I'm trying to wrap my mind around is how do you get a person to get help when they appear like they don't want it, when their disease tell them that they're not sick.
Man, so many, a lot of really excellent things that you said in that response. There's a few things that I want to um, uh, uh, pull out of that in a second as we like continue putting this definition together. But first, I want to know if anybody else wants to take a stab at, defining conflict transformation. Let's
Well,
see.
I mean, I'll just say I think
Yeah.
Rusty hit the nail on the head. I mean, understanding everyone, a lot of times stuff has not to do with you or the situation, but kind of the traumas and experiences people have had in their lives, that those patterns repeat. So you really want to resolve something to its root, you have to understand yourself and understand the person. And that conflicts are just those flare ups, things that show us kind of those patterns.
Could you speak about that? Speak about that a little bit more. More about that, you know, or I guess like dig in a little bit on that question of like what is conflict? You know, like how do you understand conflict?
I would say um, it can be as simple as miscommunications. It can be people's not meeting our expectations. Some of them spoken, some of them unspoken. Like you leaving dirty dishes in the sink. And it can be about like some really serious stuff, whether it's like the relationships. Yeah, just like serious stuff too, like about worldviews and deeper ways in which we see the world around like
Yeah.
race, gender, etc.
Yeah. Mimi, Dad, either of y'all want to speak to those questions of what is conflict? What is conflict transformation? Nas, maybe?
It's first of all, I'm just enamored by listening to Rusty, and a couple of things made me think about. I started on the transformation side, and some of the things that I've been reading lately around. Pardon the noise outside. We this is not conflict, though it may sound like that. This is young people actually getting along outside playing together. But if you hear the background, sorry. But what's interesting about there's a whole educational framework around transformative learning. A term coined by a guy named Jack Mesereau back in the 70s or so. And so the outcome of the transformation is actually a shifting in sometimes beliefs, perceptions, and assumptions and all that. And one thing I heard Rusty say that I think was key was, and just how he was informed by that, is that, relative to his friend, he recognized that there's no way he could continue to allow that person into his house. His training taught him that just based on what the person was showing him. And not, he couldn't help her by doing that. And I think, when he said that, it made me think that he was sharing that because there was a time where he thought differently about that. And that, so the experience, the perceived conflict was actually a moment of growth for him. And so I think what's important about conflict transformation is that in human interactions, there are going to always be disagreements. How we approach those matters a lot. And if we're not able to communicate those, and it resonates in conflict, that's not a pejorative matter. It's actually an opportunity for people, for individuals to grow, to learn more about yourself and about the other person, if handled right and managed right. But the interesting thing about that, and even with the TL, the transformative learning process, it is actually a very intentional process of steps, that people tend to go through to get to that really focus on a lot of critical reflection. So that's all I add to it.
Yeah, I can add too. Well, it's good to hear that kids still play together outside to actually hear the sounds of that. And I will also just ditto on Rusty. Just appreciate you sharing very openly. Um, yeah, it's real stuff, and like what you're saying is right on point of this practice of transformation. Um, and yeah, it just really hits when you speak on your own experience. So appreciate it a lot. And I think for me, like defining this practice of conflict transformation is helpful to compare it to conflict resolution, which I consider conflict resolution to be about primarily addressing the discomfort that people feel in conflict by trying to negotiate something that people can agree on and that makes them feel more comfortable in that moment. And it tends to be more short term, whereas transformation is a deeper, longer term process that often involves getting deep into the discomfort, stepping into that space and getting down to the root. And ultimately, it's about change. It's about how is this experience bring up these things that once we dive into, if we really go there, it's going to interrupt the patterns, um, or help me understand myself or someone else on a deeper level. So it's really a change process. So like in your example, like it was very hard for you to see, someone important to you struggling, and your inclination is to, bring them in. But that didn't fundamentally change the pattern of what was happening. It didn't change, the cycles of what they were experiencing in their life and what you were experiencing. And you actually had this transformation when you recognized that and made a different choice and got down to this painful root that was, I can't change this at this level, and I can't help this person in this way, even though it feels like what I want to do right now. Um, and so, yeah, I just say, like, kudos to you for looking at the hard truth of it that led you to make a change that I bet in the moment did not feel good, basically, to say no to that person. But you had this deeper understanding that led you to say, this is actually the better choice for the future of myself and, you know, what I can be in this world. Doing what was working yesterday is not the answer for tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in as well. Really a blessing for you to be here today. I think that you, um, clearly, I think have a lot to add to the conversation, just based off of who you are and the what you do. So. Yeah, I think that you really got down to it. It's about looking for, I really like the way that Mimi frames it, whereas like conflict resolution is about a short-term solution, and conflict transformation is about finding a long-term solution. And more or less, and less than a solution, more like what adjustment do we have to make in this relationship so that we don't have to keep having the same arguments. You know, I think you gave another example where it's like, an example of conflict transfer resolution that could use from some conflict transformation, but like, when you talked about the institution, because like conflict transformation slash conflict resolution doesn't just happen on like a personal level, it can happen on an institutional level as well. And I would definitely say that the current system for like treating folks who have addiction, as at least as I understand it, where folks, people get, authorities called on them if it seems like they're having a problem. People take them in and they put them in jail for a time, or they put them in a rehab facility for a time, and then they just send them back out into the street. Um, that's a short-term solution that, yeah, gets them out of immediate trouble. But if you lock somebody up for being homeless and then put them out into the street without giving them a home, then you haven't really, okay, you got them off the street technically for a little bit, but they just end up right back there. That's resolution. Whereas transformation would maybe be, okay, well, let's get you a house. What are these emotional things that has you, dealing with these addictions and these vices? Let's help you unpack those. Sometimes like people will be in relationships, abusive relationships that are, enabling them to self harm and self destruct. Like maybe it's about removing that person from that toxic environment. So it's about getting to the deeper root of what's causing the tension. And I think that you spoke to that really well. I'll give another example and maybe just like elaborate more on like my own experience from the example that I shared in the check-in. But one of the big struggles last week for me as we were trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the best way to support this person that we have in need is that, for me, it was hard to feel like there was a way that I could contribute that would be enough, you know? Um, and because really have a problem, like when I feel like I'm not doing enough, that drove me to question, like, okay, well, the suggestion that everybody else is putting forward, is that the best suggestion of the way to take care of this person? Not really thinking about like, what the group's intentions were, or even really like what the person needed, but more about like, you know, it was more about my feelings of, this is what I feel like it, I can do to step up, And so I was like crafting my vision about like how the group should be responding about what I thought I could do. And through conversations with the team, not only did like it help me kind of like, one, it helped me realize that like, sometimes it's better to step out of other people's way. Sometimes it's better to let other people provide the help that you can't give, you know, rather than you trying to provide that help and not being able to do it. But then I also realized that that was a pattern of behavior that I had been exhibiting in another area of my life, which is more about like the work that I do for this organization. I do marketing work, and I'm one of the project managers for our marketing team. And because I'm the project manager, I had been trying to, basically find somebody else to handle the content creation, even though that's what I'm good at, so that I could focus on the systems development, more of like the project management stuff. Not necessarily because that's what I was best equipped to do, but because I felt like since I'm the project manager, that's what I should be doing. But I realized that actually, just because this is my role doesn't necessarily mean I'm the best person to do this task. And in fact, our team would be better if instead of me trying to do that, I found somebody who's better at doing that part so that I can focus on what I'm good at, which is actually the content development piece. So I think like that's another aspect of conflict transformation. It helps you expose the patterns like in the situation in front of you that you can then apply to other situations and environments where those same patterns start to rise up. So it's about gaining that deeper understanding. Yeah. I there's did anybody have anything that they wanted to share or speak to or reflect on just as we've been talking?
You were picking up uh the telepathic messages I was sending you. Yeah, as we were talking, I was thinking how often the conflicts that we experience are actually the pathway to that deeper understanding that allows for change if you
Yeah.
can step into the discomfort of it. And I was wondering for Rusty if you don't mind sharing, like in that transformation that you went through in that relationship and changing how you approached trying to support that person and like just the role that you play. Like if did you have like a moment or an experience that was like, ah, okay, like this thing I've been doing isn't going to work anymore. I need to change how I'm approaching this. Like, was there a moment or experience that you can recall, or what did you go through to get to the place of making that change?
Okay, it was a lot. Because I've been knowing this person for more like 14 years, and I remember the time when I had to really do some journaling on why I think that I can help this person, and why this is so harmful for my sobriety maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, I like something that you said. I forget your name, but I like some what you said about maybe I'm not that person
Mhm.
because I'm too closely related to this person. And in my training, we are, we can we may want that if that person want that, but that may not be the best thing for them. I
Yeah.
may not be the best person to present that to come to her to advocate for her or to be that mentor to her because we're too closely related to each other. It's hard for her and myself to a certain degree. I mean, I'm pretty good at it, but no, I'm not because sometimes it becomes personal and it
Mhm.
should never get to that point where I get in my emotions, not even for a minute. It should be someone that's have those don't have those close relations with her. Yeah, it had to get to that point to where, and I did studies on it, and I had to tell myself that God did not put me on this planet to be that savior person for the rest of her life to feel like I'm feel conviction when I don't help this person,
Yeah.
when that I'm not really put on this planet to be this managed, fix, and controlling type of individual and trying to control her situation, which I end up being controlled and going through the conflicts that I'm having with her. Uh, and 2 years ago, maybe or even a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to bring her in my home and my apartment and try to help her. But I thought at that particular time, and yes, it was dire because the temperatures had fell below zero. And this person is so, social, antisocial that she's not going to go into no treatment place.
Yeah.
And when she do, she going to leave.
Mhm.
Even she put herself out of my apartment every day.
Yeah.
I don't have to say anything. This is the mental part of it, and it has gotten worse. And what makes it even worse in the conflict with me is we used to get high together. I've been sober for 6 years, but we used to get high together, and she's still actively using. And I feel like sometimes well, I believe that I am enabling her in a way.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you said, well, let that person, hit that hard place. That hard place may be death,
Yeah.
and yeah, I do feel responsible, but at the same time, I know that that's not my, that's not something that should be feel. I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't feel like it's all my responsibility. And I just do believe, like some you said, maybe someone else can help her better. Matter of fact, I believe that they could. Maybe with that someone else, maybe I could give them information that
Mhm.
would help them know more about that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's cool. It sounds like journaling was a helpful tool for you to reflect and get to a place of realizing some things about the approach wasn't healthy for you and for her. It's cool to hear that that as like a tool was important and helpful for your own reflection and your own like being able to make a different choice.
Oh yes, definitely, because it got me back into reality. Uh, Another thing, like with the addiction piece, and I was just thinking the other day as I began to work on my whole person, it's like I know we talk about peeling that onion and taking care of those character defects, but it's like it's just really beginning to dawn on me, like something you were saying, that if I took care of all of those other little things, like um, like a right, I'm really excited about my health. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
beginning to love myself more. So whenever I think about drugs and addiction, and drugs and alcohol, I'm like, well, that's not going to be good for my health. Well, I'm loving myself a lot more now. Well, that really resonates with me. Uh, it's like as I began to work on my whole person, my mental, you know, the physical, exercising, trying to a daily diet, walk and interact with other people uh, who I associate with, my surroundings, all of those things. It took a while. I had to change a lot of things, and it was a lot of layers that has to come off, but there are still layers still need to come off, and I think that transformation piece is I have to really become. I have to think totally different and embrace life from a whole different perspective.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
yeah, yeah. So, before we move on to the next session, I wanted to maybe talk about Mimi talked a little bit about the opportunities that conflict can create, and so, we have some of those here. So I maybe wanted to talk about some of those. And then after we go through the list, maybe have folks share like examples where they've seen conflict create that type of opportunity. As like to start off, the first one on the list is value and culture building. And I can definitely give an example of a way that conflict has like helped us do some of that in this space. Um, as Mimi said, conflict points out, areas of disconnect, or confusion or miscommunication. It points you to things that you need to clarify. And so, for one example, um, I think it was earlier this year, we had that big snowstorm, and one of the things that we had agreed to as like our group and our organization was that we were going to have folks here Monday through Friday, 4 hours a day, just to open up the building and have it be open, just in case anybody came in to use it or see what was going on or whatnot. But the day of the snowstorm, some of us, had some conversation and we decided, okay, they haven't paved the roads yet. We just got all this snow. Let's close down the building for the day. And uh, after that decision had been made, a few other members of our team spoke up and were like, hey, basically, I don't think that's the right call. I don't really think it makes sense to close the building today. Here's why. And that prompted a long and extensive discussion about like, what discipline means in our community, what it means to set a commitment and honor it, and also questions about like, okay, well, discipline's great, but when do you have to be adaptable? When do you have to be flexible? And so it kind of helped us, that conflict and our ability to step into it through this lens of transformation helped us begin to, clarify some things about, how we want to share space and be in community together with each other. So I think catharsis is next on the list. Basically, just this idea that it gives you the opportunity to get stuff off your chest. Sometimes conflicts happen because there are things that we're suppressing. That we're not expressing. And when you can open up about those things, it creates a world of difference. Accountability, also an important function. Letting people know, hey, that goes back to that first point about like discipline, and commitments. Accountability is all about like, hey, you said you would do this, you didn't do it. Why not? And you can't really have that conversation about why somebody didn't do what they said they were going to do unless you're willing to step into that conflict. Developing a personal voice and confidence. It's good practice for speaking up for yourself, for advocating for yourself, for letting other people know, hey, this is how I feel and this is what I think. And there's also like an environment that says like, we're not here to. I think conflict transformation creates an environment that says, we're not here to say who's right and wrong. We're here to explore the different perspectives and figure out a way forward based off of that. And related to that, learning through divergence, learning through difference. Once again, this idea that it allows you to clarify, to gain a better understanding of each other. One of the things that I can talk about with this one is with my partner. She has a very different style of cleaning and maintaining and prioritizing things than I do. And at times that's definitely been a point of tension for us. But through conflict transformation, one, we've been able to understand and learn more about the things in her childhood versus my childhood that causes her to approach these things differently than I do. But also learn more about, okay, so, you know, this is what you need to feel like our home is in order, to feel like we can live comfortably, this is what I need for that, so how can we work together to make sure that each other has what they need? Providing a holistic perspective. I think that relates to learning through divergence. It allows you to get a better understanding of where the other person is coming from. Growth opportunity, that through like all of this I think represents growth. The idea of like being able to speak for yourself better, the idea of learning more about others, the idea of like learning to step into these conflicts, and then learning about self and others, which we've already talked about a little bit. So, would anybody like to share an instance or an example where they've seen a conflict create an opportunity like this, or where they've seen somebody step into one of these opportunities as a product of some of that conflict that they've experienced?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
share on experiences I've had the last like couple years, especially with my sister. Family is always, I would say, one of the more difficult places to do conflict transformation because, you know, there was certain scripts and things that you were brought up with, as a unit, you don't even necessarily recognize. Your identities are all tied together, and they're just such close relationships, and they often strike a nerve in a way that other things can't. So my sister and I were close. That's my big sister. And this year we got into some like big confrontations, like more than we have maybe ever. And some of it was me like stepping into the courage to say things that had been weighing on me for a long time, but I had been afraid to express them, afraid that either she would do something drastic because I hurt her, deeply, or that I would lose her, or that our relationship just wouldn't be able to be strong through it. But at a certain point, it was actually like help from Khalil too a few years ago that helped get this process moving forward because we had some light conflict at a point, and I just hadn't talked to her in a little while because it was so frustrating to me. And he was like, "You need to talk to her, like you." And so he got me looking at, what did I really want to see in this relationship and what was my responsibility or my opportunity. And so we had some really difficult conversations this last year, and honestly, it was so hard. And when we would have these confrontations, like sometimes like my heart would be pounding out of my chest. I was sweating, shaking, like I really went through feeling unsafe. But I had to tell myself like, no, like you are safe. I know you're triggered and you don't feel safe, but you have to express this for you. And it's been a long and ongoing process, but I will say that like a couple months ago we were talking and we actually had this sort of blow up one morning. We got into some hot water this year too, having to step in together to doing some caregiving for my parents. So we pressure makes diamonds. Like we were in the heat together in very intense, stressful situations. And one morning she just let some stuff pop. Um, and that kind of been the dynamic for a long time that, you know, she's very good at speaking her mind and I wasn't. And she let some stuff pop one morning. I was like, I need 2 seconds to gather myself. I stepped in the other room. I took a few deep breaths. I came back. I practiced my deep listening. I gave her space to say what she needed to say and made sure that she felt heard. I repeated back to her to make sure that she knew that I understood what she was trying to say. And then I said what I needed to say when she understood that I heard her. And I'm like, listen, you know, I don't agree with you on this piece here, you know, and you know, just express it. It was tough, but about an hour later, we were driving together to the rehab hospital for my dad, and she turned to me and she said, you know, I really appreciate you being willing to have hard conversations with me. Like, I realize that that is love. And yeah, it's been transformational and I think, you know, while it's ongoing, like it's actually brought us much closer and for me, I feel a lot more free and that makes our engagement easier because I'm not holding on to stuff and I know that we can have difficult conversations and actually experience a strengthening in the relationship from it.
Yeah, I think that's right before we move on. I think that's a good opportunity to maybe talk about like why we, settled on pressure makes diamonds is like the name for this workshop. And one, it sounds good. It just sounds good. Everybody likes diamonds, but you know, um pressure and heat, that's what it takes. And um next time I'll come with this process a little bit more clearly defined in my mind. But what I know is that the pressure and heat that a lump of coal experiences in the crust of the earth, like it breaks it down, and it causes the molecules in that lump of coal to like align differently, which causes that carbon to turn into that like ultra clear, ultra refined like mineral, you know? And that's what conflict does, it breaks us down, it brings us closer together and it forces us into alignment, and through that process of like destruction and creation, we're transformed. The pictures that we have on the screen, these are flowers that tend to grow in the wake of like wildfires or volcanic eruptions. And that happens because as those lava flows come down, as those other plants and trees are burned to the ground and burned to ash, they fertilize the soil. They let sunlight hit where it wouldn't have been able to hit before. And that allows new flowers and new life to spring forward. So this is really something that you see in nature. It's a natural process that these quote unquote destructive forces can lead to creation and rebirth and transformation as well. So I think we're pretty solid on that. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. So now, as we get into this section on tools, we'll sort of bring in our the four agreements tie-in. Are you familiar with the four agreements, Rusty? Okay, yeah. So I'll give you just a quick rundown of what the four agreements are, just so that you kind of have some context for what we're talking about. But The Four Agreements is a book written by Don Miguel Ruiz. He's a spiritual leader, teacher, and a doctor who comes out of the Toltec tradition, which is a cultural, religious, spiritual group based out of like Central America. And uh, Basically what this like spiritual framework is all about is it's about how to achieve like personal freedom, how to release yourself from things like fear and anger and anxiety, and move through the world with love and openness. And so, a few like the basic concepts that he talks about in this book, and it's not his only book. He also has Beyond Fear, which is a little bit longer, but the Four Agreements is one that most people really know about. Um, the first concept is this concept of the dream, the idea that we all sort of live in our own understanding and version of reality, and that our individual understandings create our shared understanding of like society and the world, But even though we do still live in this shared understanding, this shared dream, we also all still reside in our personal dreams as well. Um, and so the second idea is this idea that human beings are domesticated animals, and basically what that means is that we're born with all of these instincts and all these desires, and all this joy and this passion. But because we're born into this shared understanding of reality, whatever those passions are that we come into the world with, they are slowly changed and morphed to fit whatever patterns or rules that the society says that we need to live by, And so that is where we start to feel a lot of self-doubt, That's where we start to feel a lot of like pain and personal anguish when we feel like we're failing to live up to the expectations that have been placed on us by this shared dream. So, with that in mind, um, a lot of those he refers to those expectations as agreements. Agreements that we make with our parents, agreements that we make with the law and the government. Agreements that we make with partners and our friends. And that when all those agreements come together, they create confusion because everybody wants something different from you. Everybody wants you to be somebody that's going to give them what they want, and it just creates a big old mess like in your mind. But the four agreements, which are be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally. What is the, hold on, what's the third? Give me 1 second. Oh, does
Don't
anybody know the third one?
don't make assumptions.
Don't make assumptions. And then the fourth one is always try your best. And the
Right.
idea is that by living these agreements, prioritizing these agreements over all others, you can, release yourself from a lot of that inner turmoil and tension that comes with trying to fit all of these other agreements together. So, we're going to start with the first agreement. Be impeccable with your word. And I've found some nice little images that sort of like sum these up into quotes. So, be impeccable with your word is speak with integrity, say only what you mean, avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. Um, Does anybody have well actually so I'll give like two more quotes and then I'll open it up for some questions and then maybe we can talk about some of the questions on the screen. So one of the big things that is made clear in this agreement is this idea that your word is your power to create. In the book, he gives the example of people like Adolf Hitler, who used their words to plunge the world into chaos and violence and destruction. You know, words are powerful. They not only help you shape your understanding of reality, but they shape other people's understandings of reality as well. And so, what people believe is real becomes real. Um, Second is this idea of being impeccable with your word. What does that mean? Being impeccable with your word basically means not using the word against yourself. Um, uh, 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 he goes through this whole sort of like etymological and like spiritual like definition process, but he basically defines what it means to be impeccable as to not do anything that goes against your nature. And so the idea of not using the word against yourself is basically about, don't say anything about yourself that isn't true or that you don't want to be true. And because the energy you put on others bounces back on you, you shouldn't do that to other people as well. Because what you say about others reflects what you think about yourself. So before I do have a few questions that I want to ask about this agreement. But before we do that, I just want to know if anybody has any interpretations of this agreement that they'd like to share, or points about like what it means to be impeccable with your word that they'd like to contribute to the conversation. What about you, Rusty? When you think about being impeccable with your word, what does that mean to you?
Saying what I mean and meaning what I say. Uh, I mean, let it like, I mean, just be true to myself. A lot of times I tell myself, be honest with yourself because no one else will. If I can't be honest with myself, then I don't leave place for growth if I don't, really be true to myself. And I like the part of not saying anything to that I don't want to be true to myself because words do have power, you know. So that's what
One of the questions that I had written out for this section is really just about like how does this idea how does this idea of you know meaning what you say and saying what you mean relate to conflict transformation. And, when you use your word in that destructive way rather than that constructive way, how does that make the conflict transformation process more difficult? Can anybody speak to that?
What's your actual question, Chan?
Yeah. So how is being impeccable? Why is being impeccable? Why is the first agreement important to conflict transformation? What role does being impeccable with your word play in that process? And then and then I guess like on the flip side of that, when you aren't impeccable with your word, when you do use the word to destroy rather than to build, how does that get in the way of that conflict transformation process?
That's a lot. I'll try some of it. I think that often communication or lack thereof is at the root of a lot of um, conflict, or I say provides opportunity for transformation. So, and then typically the communication is, muddled in a variety of factors, um, present, past, and future. So, I think, how you get there is important. I think that the conflict transformation process gives you an opportunity to correct that and to be intentional about the words. I think that's the point I really just want to reiterate again is that in order to transform the conflict, there has to be intentionality to do that. And then there has to be a process in place, that you do that with. And I think the impeccability of your word is, your probably the most tangible part of your commitment to the process.
I'll just say too that a lot of times words mean different things to different people. And one thing I see one of my mentors do a lot when they're helping others with conflict transformation is they'll pick out a word that they can hear someone saying and tell that it means something different to the different people. And they'll just ask people to define that. Like, for example, like, this didn't make me feel safe, or like that felt unprofessional, um, or like, yeah, just these different, they'll ask people to define words so you can be real clear. What does it mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think another aspect of it is kind of what Resty I think what Resty spoke to made me think about this, but I think that you have to have some clarity about like where you stand, and like what you need and what you want. What's up, John? Yeah, he's all good, Nas. He knows what to do. Put on your mask and come sit down, John. Good to see you. But yeah, you have to have some clarity about like, here's what I need this person to understand about me because this is what's true in my world. And if you don't have enough like clarity with yourself to know like this is who I am and this is what I need, then you can't even begin to express that to somebody else. And then you can't even begin to like, really transform anything because you just like you have no idea where you're trying to get to. Um, I think what Mimi also spoke to as well, the importance of like understanding that different things mean different things to different people. Um, I think that it goes back to the importance of like gaining that deeper understanding. You know, if if my version of a clean house is if my version of a clean house means that the floors have to be mopped and the ceiling fan has to be dusted and the counters need to be polished, and your version of a clean house is more just means that like the grass gets cut and all the shoes are put in the closet, and everything is like where it's supposed to be, then like you may think the house is clean and I may not think the house is clean, or I may think the house is clean and you may not think the house is clean. And then whenever we have an argument about whether or not, the house is in the state that it's supposed to be in, we're always going to be in a miscommunication, because we're saying different things. And so I think that like another part of being impeccable with your word is about like recognizing um when what's up, John, recognizing when you're when you're in that miscommunication with somebody. And we do have another guest. We did have another guest just join us, so I'm gonna zoom out first and then I'm gonna pass the mic to you, John, to do your
Is that Dr.
check-in.
Monday? Is that Dr.
Dr.
Monday?
Monday.
Oh wow.
Then I'll pass it to you to do your check-in and then maybe speak to the question that we're talking to a little bit. So the check-in is a number, color, and a recent conflict experience that you've had. And then we're talking about why the first agreement, be impeccable with your word, is so important to conflict transformation.
What was that list again?
Um, Number, color, most recent conflict
I like
experience.
the number nine because I use it in math to check your problems, cast out all the nines. Yeah. And what was the next one, please?
Most recent color.
Most recent color.
Oh, your color for today. What color?
I like black, still like black.
And then most recent conflict experience.
Well, that's why I'm here. I'm having a little conflict right now with KI over. Uh, I try to define my place in the system, and so as well as I try to I'll speak to that later.
Okay.
But thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Did you want to speak to any other questions on the board? Really, that first one. Are you familiar with the four agreements?
Yeah, I read the four agreements when it came out, man.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Nice. So in that case, the first agreement, how does that play into conflict transformation?
You just gotta watch what you say, and I don't. I don't. Uh, which goes along with that first agreement. Uh, I've learned a lot by I write a lot, so I don't talk as much, and I do a lot of writing and a lot of publishing online since I got a book, a Facebook page, and all this stuff. So I get a lot of people who disagree with me, and I disagree with them, and uh, but I try to. I mean, I'm sincere when I write and make my statements. I just didn't drop out of the sky. I came from the other side of the tracks. I grew up on the south side. Went to Wood High School. My parents were factory workers. Didn't graduate from high school. They were high school dropouts, et cetera, et cetera. And I went on to learn how to write when I went to the extension, Purdue Extension, then to graduated from Lafayette campus, then got a master's from IU. Again, I learned how to write and had professors checking every word, every period, every dot, and I had to somehow back that up. So I learned, and from the streets as well. When you're arguing on a corner over whatever, a basketball shot or whatever, you got to be, you can get beat up, you get in trouble, you can get hurt if you're not impeccable with your word. And I learned that growing up in a Fountain Square, going to Wood High School, not so much Purdue. But back to my point, this is you got to let, especially young men who are on the corner in an argument, and somebody's going to end up getting hurt if somebody's misunderstood. And you got to say what you mean and mean what you say. This is a good agreement to have young people practice and to make it important to them. They're not going to think, and I'm concerned with young people. They're not going to think you're stupid or you're just bringing stuff up. This is an important, especially when people are debating over the best, who's got the best album, who's got the best this and that, and you got to know what you say and mean what you say and watch what you say, and uh, so impeccable with your word again, is important to me because I write and publish and get into arguments over education and stuff with people and have disagreements with people, like with KI and my role in desegregating KI and things like that. And, I got my viewpoint, and I came up here today because I love KI, love everybody here, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about this agreement.
Great to have you, man. I'm gonna ask one more question on the screen, and then we're gonna move on to the next set of tools. But I'm just curious if anybody's ever had an experience in conflict where somebody changing their language has changed the course of the conversation or the tone of the conversation. Wonder if anybody's ever seen that happen in real time.
Got an example?
Yeah, I think I do have an example. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Let me see if I can recall this correctly. Okay, yeah. Oh, wait, I just had it. Okay, yeah. Once again, this is another experience from my relationship. Uh, and I that's just because I have a great partner and we get at shit. Even when we disagree. But well, I don't remember exactly what it was we were talking about, but I think I was basically trying to just like explain here's what's on my day, you know, and here's what I'm trying to get done, here's what my priorities are, blah 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 blah. And she was, you know, she started kind of like walking through it with me, and she started making these suggestions, you know, well, maybe you could do this here, and maybe you could do this here instead, you probably shouldn't do this, da 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 da. And I think she understood that I was starting to get a little frustrated, you know. And so, you know, we she asked me why, and we talked about it a little, and she realized that like the way that she was coming at me was from a way of like the I guess like the way that I was interpreting the way that she was coming at me based on her language was, let me help you fix your schedule. You know, let me make corrections to your to-do list. Which I typically don't like. I don't like when people
I'm glad you told me.
yeah,
I'm glad
you
you told me.
know, yeah, you know, I don't like to feel like somebody thinks that like they need to come behind me and like you know, like micromanage
I
basically.
hear it.
But that wasn't what she was trying to do at all, you know. And she was like made it clear like, oh, you know, I wasn't really trying to change things or anything like that. I was more like thinking out loud, trying to basically just like understand and like get your list down in my mind. And so after that, you know, she shifted her language to be a little bit less of like, well, this is what you should do. And she switched it to be more about, she switched her language to be a little bit more inquisitive, you know? So what were you thinking with this? You know, like, why this here? And that helped us have that conversation a little bit easier. So,
She
yeah.
tried to, I'm making up a word. She tried to impeccabilize
Impeccable eyes. I like that. I
your
like that.
you
Yeah.
want it.
And, you know,
So,
in doing so, we both had to impeccabilize. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
now, you know, this is around the world, so people be using impeccabilize. Your Honor,
Well, I hope so. Anybody else have anything that they want to
I
share?
want to say
Yeah,
something
go
too,
for it.
if I might.
Take the mic.
Just an example of of a political example of a poem I wrote, "Who Killed Michael Taylor," and the politics of impeccability, impeccableness, and you better get it right or else. And this book here, "A Death and Duplicity," is really the only book that's no. Sadiq came out with a book on the Michael Taylor incident, Muhammad Sadiq. But this guy here, John Benjamin Carn, put out this book on the death uh, and the duplicity involved in the Michael Taylor incident. And that's why I wrote the song "Who Killed Michael Taylor," and it was for put on a album, a reggae album. But uh, I'm talking about a real important impeccability, impeccableness in regard to politics and death and duplicity, because Michael Taylor, the police said he shot himself in the head while he was handcuffed in the back of a police car with a 32 that was in his shoe. Of course, the police claimed out of the other side of their mouth that they searched him more than once, and they couldn't find no 32 in his shoe that Michael Taylor, handcuffed in back of a police car, evidently supposedly pulled this out and shot himself in the head. So talk about being impeccable with your word, talking about with a BS, because how I do it, and it's one of the agreements that it's the fifth agreement. Are you aware of the fifth agreement? Yeah, the author put out a fifth agreement. Always have a craft detector. Yeah, you'll read it. It's the fifth agreement that you'll have a craft detector, that which KI is noted for around the city in as an example, and I've learned it to hone that skill more. And Paulette and Imhotep, etc., and all the people here uh, made their fame by making sure people were saying what they meant, talking and doing what they talked about. And so back to the Michael Taylor incident, where the police bald-faced lied. They still lied. They're still lying today because they refuse to look at this case where this young man supposedly shot himself in the head with the 32 that was in his shoe while he was handcuffed in back of a police car. You want me to say that again? No, I don't have to be in. Yeah, that's what they claim
Well, I will say,
after they searched him.
yeah. And what I will say on that, I think is like, that incident, I think illustrates another aspect of what's important about being impeccable with your word because, like, you can't build a strong relationship with somebody without trust, you know? And when you aren't impeccable with your word, when you repeatedly fail to be impeccable with your word, you lose people's trust. And I think that we see a lot of that right now with the police and a lot of other like institutions and government in this society. It's just like there's been a lot of, you know, people who feel like they've been let down, like they've been promised things that they have not received, that they've been misled and misguided by the people that they're supposed to be able to trust. And so, yeah. So, I'm gonna pass this to you, John,
I,
and we
I'll
gotta,
add
we gotta keep
I'll
it
add
moving.
one thing as well. I think relative to being impeccable with your word is working with young
Go
people.
for it, and go to the next slide now as well. We get this next point. Go for it.
I think it's important that when you're working with young people that your word really matters. I've always found it helpful not to engage in power struggles with young people, and sometimes those moments are often triggered by comments that young people perceive as sarcastic or devaluing or something like that. So I think engaging with young people requires sensitivity about what you're saying and how you're saying as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they're teenagers.
Say that one more time.
That's why they're defined as teenagers. See, that's what teenagers do. Uh, you draw the line, and the teenagers see if you mean it. That's their job. And but I wanted to say one more point. That's why I decided to write in poetry and take my word, if you will, with poetic license, to do it poetically and to reach different people. And that's why I wrote the poem "Who Killed Michael Taylor." So I'm just adding another definition of word and what we're talking about through poetry and other ways to make sure we can communicate. Sometimes poetry is a better way of communicating, getting our point across. And this is a very important conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So before we get into the second agreement, I did want to talk a little bit just about some other tools that can help us, be impeccable with our word. The first one, and this is the one that I think Kepra really tries one of the ones that Kepra really tries to practice. We really try to practice all of them, but this is a big one. And it's just about building it into your culture. And I think that as that relates to being impeccable with your word, it's about having a culture of realness, kind of like what John spoke to, our founders, our organization is really known for like trying to understand what people mean when they say what they say and then trying to hold them to that. And so we do that in a lot of ways. We have like space in our weekly meetings that's really just about like conflict transformation. We have like frequent real talk sessions where it's literally just about like, just say what's on your mind, say what's on your chest, and then we'll sort it out. And then even that check in that we do at the beginning of every conversation, that gives folks an opportunity as well to say what's on their mind, say what they've been thinking about, and let people know, hey, this is where I am today. So, and that relates to, I think, the second point as well, which is about like practice. I think like culture really is about like the ways that we practice being in space with each other. getting at it as well. You can't let stuff like this fester and bubble under the surface. You got to address it when it's time to address it. And then I think the last one is really about scenario planning. Sometimes it helps, like, and this is an exercise that you can do and take home maybe. But if you feel like you have a conflict that you are maybe not sure how to approach, or that you're nervous about approaching, do some scenario planning. Like, okay, if I say this, this is what I'm worried. This is how I'm worried this person will respond. This is how they'll respond in the best case scenario. And then you have some options and some ideas that you can take with you into that interaction. So we're running a little bit low on time, so we'll go over to the next slide, and then we'll wrap up the tools section and then start closing it out. So the second agreement, don't take anything personally. This one, the summary of this one is, nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. I think Rusty, a lot of what you were talking about made me think about this one, especially when you spoke about this idea that, like, as responsible as I may feel for this person, I also have to understand that, their actions, I'm not going to be able to control their actions. They're going to do what they're going to do regardless of what I do. Um, so I think, like, a few quotes that are really powerful from this section to me. Um, Personal importance, or taking things personally, is the maximum expression of selfishness, because we make the assumption that everything is about me. You know, it's the idea that, you know, it all comes back to the way that your actions affect everything around you. It almost like places you at the center of the universe. The idea that, like, everything that I do, defines the world around me. But that's not really the case. um uh yeah, yeah. People, I think it goes back to what we talked about at the start, the idea that everybody lives in their own interpretation of the world and reality. Somebody may tell you, "Hey, I did this because of something you said to me," but at the end of the day, like, they had to make that decision to interpret your words to move them to action. They had to make the decision to say that, like, okay, because this person said this means that I need to do this. That doesn't mean that, we ignore the way that other people respond to us. That doesn't mean that we ignore the impact that we can have on other people. Once again, you got to be impeccable with your word, because words have power. But it's also to understand that, like, sometimes the story that somebody tells in their head about what you've said or done is different than what you've actually said or done. And so then the other one that I think is really important for this one is, if you keep this agreement, you can travel around the world with your heart completely open and no one can hurt you. How do folks interpret that? This idea that when you don't take anything personally, nothing can hurt you.
That was one to practice.
Yeah, you think
Is it?
so? Yeah. Yeah, they say that the first one is the toughest one to practice. Talk about why this not taking anything personally one is difficult for you.
Because when you stick your neck out, and when you hang out with the KI people, and the legend that they have, you put yourself up to, you're more vulnerable, and you're uh, and when people that you care about and trust and like uh, say something that you don't like about you, it's hard not to take it personally. But as he says in the book, is if you're somebody comes up and shoots you in the head, you just don't take it personally. You can't. And this this has helped me survive uh, my artistic expressions and the other expressions that I do, and with the confidence I've learned about politics, hanging out with KI from way back, and I learned a lot. And this is one of the things I'm able to come here today and uh, discuss my ideas because I'm not going to take them personally. It's a good one degree. It's the toughest agreement.
Yeah.
So hard, but it's most powerful.
I'd like to hear Mimi speak to this one a little bit as well. I think you've got some very deep insights about this one, Mimi.
Well, thanks, friend. Well, I agree with Dr. Monday. I feel like this, for me, was one of the most difficult, and therefore, in mastering it, also one of the most liberating. Um, yeah, I mean, just coming to the realization that what people do and say to you is a projection of a mirror, and we're often doing the same thing with others. So like when something that someone else does deeply bothers me, a lot of the time it's because it's something I'm internally conflicted about. Um, and coming to that realization, one, helps me then step into my power in a situation. Um, because there's things I can deal with inside of myself, and I don't have to change anybody else's behavior to address it. That itself is very freeing. I find it very like empowering. Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, I used to be someone that took everything personally, just everything. Oh my gosh. And I would be in my feels and having these conflicts all the time. And it was so draining and tiring and depressing and frustrating. And I don't know, the more that, I think, learned to be like better at stepping into someone else's shoes and understanding from their perspective why they're doing what they're doing and why it's important to them, like just realizing like it's not about me, like uh I just, it's hard to put in words the how freeing and liberating that is. And it gives you the grace to also understand others and their wholeness.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, Rusty, if you have any perspectives on this one, on what it means, what it means to not take things personally, or maybe even, what it means to take something personally.
Yeah, I used to be one of those people as well that I used to go through the ringer all the time with personalizing things. And I had to do some journaling with that as well. I guess journaling is one of those things that I do now these days when I find myself, losing space. But anyway, um, it's not about me, right? It's not about you. It's my my words and how you take those words definitely can have an impact on people different. And I know for myself, I have to separate. I have to get me out of the picture. I used to really like Mimi said, I used to really be like all messed up inside all the time because of it. Uh, my friend, and sometimes she may say things, and I'm like, and my words may not mean the same thing to me as it do to her when I say it's not about, you're not that important. And I don't mean that, I don't say that to cause that person harm, or it's not all about you. People that deal with schizophrenia, uh, paranoia, have a tendency to say things like, they talk bad about themselves, and they'll speak some really negative things about their world and how they perceive their world. But I have to be aware of that for other people, that what I say, it may not mean the same thing, that how they're taking that. And for me, I had to start really doing some cognitive uh, therapy on my own self to really get to the meat of why I continue to take things personal. And I like that, uh, because I've have some kind of, maybe you're right, maybe I might have some kind of conflict within myself with that. Something may have, I may have some trauma in that area with those words that you're using. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, something that you said that was interesting is like this idea about like the way that we talk to ourselves, and obviously people with schizophrenia deal with that, but we all deal with that. We all have a lot of things that we say about ourselves. And one of the things that I think is there are two things that I think are very interesting and that do make this a very difficult one to really, really internalize. One, it's remembering that you don't even have to take the stories you tell about yourself personally, because the stories that you tell about yourself aren't always true just because they're coming from you. Sometimes that's really somebody else's voice in your head, like, yeah, exactly. And then the other one is the idea that you shouldn't even take good things personally. You like, if somebody gives you a compliment, you should be able to be just as neutral about that as if somebody gives you an insult, because otherwise you start to tie your understanding of your value to other people's definition of what's valuable and what's good. You should be able to, good, bad, or ugly, whatever somebody gives you, you should be able to take that as their observation, their reality. And then you should be impeccable enough with your own word and your own understanding to be able to say, okay, and this is my reality. This is what's true for me. Um, uh, let's go ahead and go to the next section on tools. But did anybody want to say anything else about taking stuff personally? Yeah, please.
I read I read the paper, and because I'm interested in this, I read about all the shootings, and especially young men who, you stepped on my shoe. So, uh, and all the violence that happens all the time in Naptown over people taking things personally. And they got a gun as well. But there's a lot of shootings over this. Terrible.
Yeah, it gets to this idea of like, honor and respect. And while I do think that like things like honor and respect are important to a lot of people, which makes them important, I also think, you know, a lot of people have this idea of respect that makes it easy for them to be disrespected, you know, because, you make it easy for somebody to, you're basically being like, you take everything as an attack, an attack on your honor, your internal value, your internal worth, you know, um, kind of like, John spoke to, you know, um, if you tell me that I'm a punk, or I'm soft or whatever, you know, I if I take that personally and I worry, then I'm worried that that's true. And so then I have to do something to prove you wrong. And then it just starts this vicious cycle. So, yeah. Yeah, John said it, and unfortunately, you're probably right. Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to suggest that you put out a video somehow. I don't know how it's going. So because you're reasoning with me and others, and because you know that you put out some short video where you're reasoning with young people about this and help them think through this, the ins and outs of it, because they no one's is. I don't think the church is doing it necessarily. I don't think school's doing it necessarily, or the Boys and Girls Club or anything. But it's an important thought process that you have to go through, which you went through, and that's just the way you handle this. Congratulations. I would try to put out a teaching video or something where you're trying to reason because you're of that same level as well. And I don't know, you just make a lot of sense to me.
Hey, I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, maybe there's something we'll take a closer look at. But I definitely think a big thing was that with that is just like helping people understand that, like, you know, I think a lot of it is helping people build enough of an internal sense of like value and direction to not feel, you know, it's sort of like he speaks to when you don't take anything personally, you can walk through the world with your heart open without being hurt, and I think a lot of people don't know how to walk through the world without being hurt, and so they end up, they just end up on the defense. Yeah. But yeah, let's go to that next tool slide. Um, we'll probably skip the breakout rooms for tonight just because we've got a small group and we've been going in pretty deep. But we will talk about a few other tools that folks can use and look closer at to maybe start doing some deeper digging on some of these conflict transformation tools and principles. The first one that we talk about a lot is a book that a lot of people know about, especially a lot of people in the Kepler space, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Specifically, habits 4, 5, and 6. Habit 4, think win win. A lot of people go into the world as if in order for me to get something, you have to lose something. A lot of people have this dog eat dog mentality that doesn't allow them to collaborate with people, that doesn't allow them to work towards solutions that could potentially work for everybody. So, habit 4, think win win, is about how to understand that we can all benefit. You don't have to lose for me to win. We can win together. And in fact, like when I uplift you, I uplift myself as well. I think it reminds me of that piece about being impeccable with your word, where he says that, like, the energy you put on others bounces back on you. Habit 5 is about deep listening. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Resty, I think you spoke to this well in the beginning when you talked about your experience, how you had to learn more about the particular illness and condition that your friend is going through in order to be able to communicate with her more effectively. And I think that that one's very real. It's about, because like we've said, we don't always speak the same language. We don't always approach things with the same frameworks. And so, excuse me. I think that before you can really communicate to somebody what you feel, you got to understand where they're coming from, so that you can align your message in a way that they can understand. And then the habit 6, synergize. This is basically about, complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses. So I think that this spoke to this is the example that I shared at the beginning with like our personal conflict. Um, some people were equipped to stay at the hospital overnight to watch over this person in our community that's in there right now and to make sure that they're okay. Some of us, myself included, can't do that, can't be there overnight. So rather than trying to make sure that everybody can do it one way or the other, let's work together to figure out, okay, here's who can do this part of it, here's who can do this part of it, and that's how we can balance each other out. The next tool by John Maxwell is another book, 5 Levels of Leadership. A lot of that is about how to become a leader that can develop other leaders. It's about learning how to help other people along in their growth. But one of the principles that he speaks about in this book specifically is this idea of balancing care with candor. You know, the idea that care, that one's pretty self-explanatory. You know, you have to be careful of where this other person's coming from, how they feel, how they might react. You know, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or you don't want to, do any unnecessary damage. But at the same time, you gotta have some candor. You gotta be candid. You know, you gotta speak how you feel. You know, you gotta let people know. And so you have to find the balance of like, I need to deliver this message to you, and I need to deliver it with clarity, but I also need to deliver it in a way that takes into account, you don't want to deliver a message to somebody that they ain't gonna hear, you know. Um, some a lot of people some a lot of people like to scream and yell, and a lot of people really don't respond to screaming and yelling, you know. And so, if you are a person that likes to scream and yell and you want to get your point across to somebody that doesn't deal with screaming and yelling, then you got to adjust, because otherwise you're just going to have to scream and yell a whole lot and they are not going to hear you, and you're just going to have to keep going at it. And did you have something that you wanted to share, John?
Uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna suggest that you go to a Boys and Girls Club,
Oh yeah.
because what you're doing here is putting, I think, depending on their age and their situation, through a rite of passage. That's what you're doing. You're getting them. This is what you do when you're in adulthood, and these rites of passage. Because I can't see right now the church and other groups talking about this in the way you do. And I would hire myself out to a Boys and Girls Club where I would go in and talk about this stuff. Because see, you got a good balance of street smarts and book smarts, and I would make this available in some sort of form. I'm saying right now, you go to the Boys and Girls Club with the sign up sheet that who you are, and have them sign up voluntarily to come and talk to them, because those are your peers, and they're the ones that's going to, I think, uh, be helped right now more than some guy my age. So it's just, I just envision you reasoning in a chair, bent over, with the young people at the Boys and Girls Club about these ideas here and what they're going to face, because, again, uh, you're their age, and it's the way you handle yourself.
Appreciate the suggestion, man. And yeah, this workshop is presented by Scarabus Consulting, and we're looking for all sorts of opportunity. We do we'll do it for anybody, young, old. So I think that might be another avenue for us to look at. Yeah, yeah, and also getting that intergenerational aspect in there too. Yeah, yeah. But all right. Another tool that we use is the ABC tool: attitudes, behaviors, and context. Now, this is more of a better as a group exercise. Um, say one more time. Restroom, right down there. Yeah. Attitudes, behavior, and context. Now, this is basically an exercise in which folks involved basically take turns, uh, uh, you know, putting together um, their own sort of like perspective on each of these factors: attitudes, behavior, and context, which are all the sort of things that make up the way that you respond in a conflict scenario. And it's really about like getting it all out there. You know, this is the way that you feel about these. This is the way that the people in our group feel about this issue. This is what our temperature is to it. This is the way that those feelings cause us to respond and cause us to react. Like, if I hear this, I tend to get heated. If I hear this, I tend to close off. And then the context is all about, well, what's the environments around us, and how is that shaping our understanding of what's going on and what's happening and where we're trying to get to. So I think that that's really a tool around, deep listening, around that deeper understanding and inquiry, and it's designed to basically help you get to the bottom of, like, why are we why are we where we are, in terms of the relationship. um, and some similar examples are the onion tool and the tree tool. I won't go too in depth on those right now. Also, the four agreements. Don't take anything personally. We talked about that one earlier today. The last one is the conflict style self assessment, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit more at our next one of these sessions. But that's basically about. Understanding what's my approach to conflict. And really not even like what's my approach to conflict. What are the different ways that people can approach conflict? And then how do you break those different approaches out in different situations? Some people are sharks, they like to go at it, they like to get into it, they go for blood. And that's really good in some situations. Sometimes you really do need somebody who's willing to, you know, step into it and really get at the issue, even if they risk shaking shit up a little bit, you know. But other people are a little bit more avoidant. I think that those are the turtles. And that style of conflict is very useful and wise sometimes, because there are some conflicts that you're not going to be able to win, some that you're not going to be able to transform. And I think, like, that's another tool, is discernment, being able to tell when this is something worth stepping into and when this is something worth stepping away from. So, the conflict style assessment, and yeah, we'll make a point to talk about that one at our next one. But that's another good helpful tool as well. So, Nas, go ahead and skip to the last slide. Maybe we can just do some any closing reflections that people might have. Um, Obvious, we've got our contact survey. So please do take a second to fill that out and let us know any feedback that you have on the presentation, or how you felt about what we talked about tonight. And but yeah, I think I'll open it up to the room one last time. Any final reflections or takeaways on this journey of conflict transformation? Yeah. Rusty, we were just getting finished up, but would love to know, if you, as we finish up, if you have any reflections or takeaways from what we've discussed today.
I'm glad that I found out where you guys were, where you guys are. It's I like a lot of what you said, John, about speaking to the younger generation because of his book knowledge and the way you carry yourself, your age. Man, I can see a lot of people, young people, really getting a lot of direction with the conflict. Maybe it's just this subject, but maybe the overall this is a whole different thing. But with this subject in particular, yes, definitely. Uh, I think this is a great group, and I'd like to have the Zoom link where I can really tune in. I really did get a lot out of this. It encouraged me in a lot of other things that I'm doing to kind of get back engaged in that and not lose focus. So,
Thank you, man. And yeah, before you get out of here, I'll show you where to go to get that Zoom link so that you can join us for the next session. Anybody else have anything that they want to share?
Well, again, I'm being redundant, but I got to, Chinlelu, this is all natural to him too. He just talks and talks, and this and that, like he was born with it, which he is in a way. And it's that, and all those factors, I'm impressed. And I don't know what you. Uh, we need to package this and sell it in America, in a capitalist country, and Kepler's got to do that and get you some. Because I can see again, and I'm a rites of passage guy. You don't know that. Making this because you're so reasonable, and you're a peer, and PEER to the young people, and uh, I would consider. I don't know what you're going to do with the rest of your life, man. But what do you think? He's reasoning with me. I got nothing. I'm not getting up and leaving.
Well, I appreciate y'all for the kind words and thank y'all for, being here and being engaged and, and for contributing as well. You especially, Rusty, especially for this being your first time in the space, man. I think you brought a lot of richness to the conversation today. So I definitely hope to see you at the next one and at future sessions. But we will be continuing our discussion of the four agreements at our first section next month. We do these weekly. We do these meetings weekly, but the topic changes on a weekly basis. So next week we're going to be having some more conversation about urban agriculture. We're going to be talking with some folks out of Bloomington that run a local cooperative market initiative. But we'll be back to talk about the four agreements at the beginning of May. We will be back with our next workshop on the second two agreements towards the middle of May. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. Thank you to everybody who joined us today and participated. Thank you to my other fellow Scarabus facilitators. Thank you to our guests who joined us here in person today. Thank you to the Indianapolis Recorder for being a content partner and helping us get this Mumbo Jumbo series off the ground, and for supporting community storytelling in Indianapolis for over 100 years now. And as always, if you want to support the work of the Kepler Institute, if you want to support Scarabus Consulting, visit donate.kepler.org and leave a donation. And visit scarabus.com. Scarabys, scarabus.com, and learn a little bit more about what we do. And yeah,